Very recently, it occurred to my cleric character, Inquisitor Royce, that the head of the church that he worshipped at was not, in fact, a man of God, but a heretical sorcerer who worshipped and derived their power and ambition from a profane flame beneath the earth. To Inquisitor Royce, this sounds a lot like paganism. So Royce wrote a strongly worded letter to his local bishop, and Mr. Sulyvahn was relocated to a more accepting community and parish. So this is my lore reason for moving Inquisitor Royce, who was like my central Irithyll character, up to like 63 plus 8, which is like Irithyll Dungeon, Profane Capital, and the general post-Pontiff area. I did this because I've been thinking a lot about level synergy, both in terms of like gameplay, but also how these characters fit lore-wise into the level that they're invading. Like, why is this particular character invading you in this particular area? And for Inquisitor Royce, it just made so much more sense to be in the dungeon, where there are prisoners to interrogate, but also where there's bleed, which synergizes well with the Rose of Ariandel, and now I get to use Gnaw because I have 30 faith, and also lightning doesn't reset the maggots that cause the bleed. And there's a couple other small advantages, like the corridors are really narrow, so I have a very small curved sword, so my weapons aren't bouncing off the walls like something like a wide swinging straight sword might. And since the Rose of Ariandel is a whip, it can't be parried, but it also can't bounce off walls at all, which is a nice little benefit. But the real reason I wanted to make this video is because I made a lore-friendly Frost build specifically for Central Irithyll. I think I might have talked about this in my last video. Everyone likes invading in Central Irithyll, but I wanted to make a character that's supposed to be like who the Outrider Knights were in their early stages before they became more beast-like. I really like the Outrider Knight enemies across Dark Souls 3. I think that's like one of the highlights and one of like the semi-original pieces of lore, considering that the lore for the Pontiff Knights is that they essentially all turn into beasts. Oh my god, Miyazaki, we get it. We get it. You liked making Bloodborne. But anyways, this is kind of like an Outrider character named Pontiff's Blade. They're supposed to be like the precursor to Pontiff. They go out and they hunt down all the Ashen Ones who might challenge him. So at first glance, you might be like, holy shit, you're using two of the scrubbiest weapons possible. That's correct. But I try to use them in different ways so they're not just obnoxious as hell. The Irithyll Straight Sword is like one of the longest straight swords in the game, and it can proc Frost in about like 4 or 5 hits, which for a straight sword that long is pretty easy to land. You also don't necessarily have to hit everyone every single time. You can get a lot of those ghost hits where due to latency it looks like you hit them, but on their screen they rolled it, so it counts it as a roll and they don't take any damage, but they do build up Frost. The Irithyll Straight Sword doesn't do a ton of damage, but not a lot of weapons do a ton of damage at this level anyways. This is also kind of the last stage of the game where Frost, does good damage, or I find it to be very helpful. And like a lot of other status effects, it ignores shields, can add extra damage to your criticals, and its damage tear when it procs is modified by the Hornet Ring as well, so you get extra damage while wearing the Hornet Ring when you proc Frostbite on someone. Frost is a lot like Bleed in many ways, and that is about the burst damage of it. Like 1 second the person thinks they're fine, the next they're way too low on health than they were comfortable with. Here I'm getting my ass kicked in this duel, but once I get the momentum back on my side, I get the Frostbite to proc, and I've already leveled the playing field, and just need to get one hit to win. The other thing about Frost is that it can be reset by hitting them with a fire weapon, or just any sort of attack that has fire in it. And what you'll see me do a lot is, proc Frost, and I'll hard swap to a Lothric Knight Straight Sword, pop a Pine Bundle on it, and then hit them with it at least once. I try to just use the fire buff while I have it, just because a sharp Lothric Knight Straight Sword buffed with anything really just does really good damage. So I'll roll with that and then hard swap back to the Irithyll Straight Sword to try to get that Frost to proc again. That's the biggest difference between Bleed and Frost, is that Bleed goes away immediately, but takes longer to proc and is a little bit harder to proc. Frostbite procs much faster, but has a longer cooldown in which you aren't supposed to be able to proc Frost again unless you reset it. So that's just like another wrinkle to this build. It's another strategy for myself to keep in mind while I'm using it, which makes it a lot of fun. I think I only talked a little bit about level synergy in this build, and Frost kind of fits pretty well into Central Irithyll. One, just for lore reasons, but also because there's a couple enemies in the area that build up Frost. The Pontiff Knights have like one attack. I think just the one attack, which is the Pontiff Knight Curved Sword R2. That builds up a lot of Frost when the Pontiff Knights do it. And then there's also the dogs in like the back alley kind of area. And here you'll see me just melt these two blues because they're already under pressure from these like nightmare dogs who already build up Frost, and then I'm hitting up the Irithyll Straight Sword, which is building up even more Frost. I've made a couple other videos where I've been using like offhand Reapers, and they work pretty well. They're usually typically a little bit heavy for the benefit they actually provide, but I just like it for how well it pairs with the Straight Sword. Frida's paired scythes are like the opposite of efficient. They're super heavy and they need a pretty specific build to work. Ultimately, it is a dex weapon. That's what they benefit from most in terms of scaling. But what I find especially fun about them is just the two-handed moveset. It is unique, and it has a special property to it where the second and third swing are true combos if you land just the second one. So for most weapons, the first swing has enough hit stun to guarantee a second hit, but that second swing by itself has very little hit stun properties. This is true of things like straight swords and great swords. But on Freed Scythe, I'll throw out an R1 first as a bait, and then just keep swinging because I know if I get that second one, I can also get a third. Freed Scythe is also really overused by bad players who get through the entire game by just using the weapon art the entire time. And the weapon art can be very useful for what I like to call mini poise trades. So again, straight swords, spears, axes, basically anything without substantial hyper armor, you can just poise through with the weapon art. But what I like about the weapon art most is that it's a stance, and you can kind of just throw out the stance just to kind of get a reaction out of your opponent. Against a lot of the invaders that I fight, I'll go into the stance just for a second, and they'll immediately throw out a parry. And then after that I can either try to roll catch them, or circle backstab them if they throw out two parries in a row, which they kind of often do. Personally, I really like staggering the weapon art and then restarting it, because essentially what that does is your opponent often cues a roll after getting hit by that first one, and because the hit stun is so long, you can kind of trap them in another one. And then the third part of the weapon art, which is like the finisher, has like a lot more range than people think, and it can be a good mix-up to throw out if you haven't just been spamming the weapon art the entire time. So yeah, this build is pretty fun. It does pretty good burst damage, especially for this level, and that combined with a PvE that's honestly pretty scary, you end up winning most of your invasions with this build. Like, it's almost to the point sometimes where it's a tiny bit boring. Like, sometimes the PvE does all your work for you, and you're like, no, I wanted to fight those guys. And meanwhile, the Fire Witches just blow everyone up with their Pillars of Flame, which is a lot of fun to witness. A funny aspect of this build, though, is that a lot of people don't really take you seriously when you pull out the Irithyll Straight Sword. The Irithyll Straight Sword is kind of like the Kevin weapon of the game. You see it paired a lot with the Fallen Knight set, and whenever you see that combo, you're kind of just like, oh, this person probably doesn't know what the hell they're doing. So you get a lot of people who don't really respect what it can do, and honestly, that's a huge benefit to me. In this clip, I'm in a dried-fingered world, and for whatever reason, I never got a co-invader. But it doesn't really matter, because I basically just kill every single person in this party, pretty much only using the Irithyll Straight Sword. I use the Scythe a little bit, but the Straight Sword does all of the work, and I'm not even playing particularly well. I'm just outspacing attacks and being a little bit aggressive with a Straight Sword that procs Frost. So after his whole party dies to, what is considered a thoroughly Kevin weapon, the host just pulls the plug, which is probably for the best for him. Ultimately, though, the Irithyll Straight Sword isn't very good at this level. It's good for what I'm doing, which is like a Frost build, and I'm trying to, make something unique and something that fits into the lore. But it's not, a good weapon. I would consider the Irithyll Straight Sword to be good at, 40+4 or or 30+3 for like swamp games. But I still wouldn't say it's a good weapon for this level. But I do have a very good weapon for this level, which is the Pontiff Knight Curved Sword, and I have no reservations using it on this build, because that's literally the lore of this build. It's called Pontiff's Blade, after all, right? I really don't use it for every invasion, because I already have a Curved Sword character, and this Curved Sword is just by far the best. And if I used it on every invasion, they would all kind of be the same, because this weapon's really good. So I've kind of taken to calling this Curved Sword, you know, the Find Out Sword, you know, because you fucked around, and now you're about to find out. And what is my definition for fucking around? It's the, like, I'm just gonna run away forever and hope blues can be summoned to bail my ass out. It's the, oh no, all my phantoms are dead, time to run all the way back to the bonfire to resummon them for free. We're not doing that. You're gonna find out faster than you can resummon those phantoms. But anyways, guys, that's all I really had to say about this build. Just trying to make different builds across all different levels that have some sort of synergy and lore basis as to how they fit into each level. This might be the last lore build in a little bit, just because I have a couple other videos planned that I wanted to make, and I'm also running out of character slots. I've filled up like almost all of my character slots with characters that I really like, and I don't really want to delete too many of them. So I'm getting to the point where I only have 1 or 2 character slots left, and I want to fill those with fun, interesting builds. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.